What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. And if you are new here, you have landed on what is generally one of the more passionate deep dives I have done in a while. Because today we are going all the way in on a film that I honestly did not accept to care about as much as I ended up caring about it. We are talking about Pride 2025 Scott Adkins martial art war film. And before you even think about clicking away or going, oh, it's just another direct to video thing, nobody cares. I want you to just give me 60 seconds because I promise you there's so much more happening inside that as someone who went into these things with, let's be honest, moderately calibrated expectations because Scott Adkins has a filmography that runs the full gamut from genuinely great to deeply questionable, and you never know which version of the creative wheel you are going to spin on any given project. This one spun somewhere genuinely interesting, and I have been sitting with it, rewatching it in sections, reading through what various critics and audience said about it, comparing it against Adkins' broader catalog, and I have assembled a lot of thoughts. Some of those thoughts are warm and glowing, and some of them are a little frustrated, and today you are getting all of them. Look, here's the pitch for why you should stay, and I want to give you the honest version rather than some YouTube hook designed to manipulate you into watching. Prison of the War is doing something that almost nobody in action cinema attempt, and I mean that literally there are not many films you can name that try to do what this one is doing, and that uniqueness alone is worth 2 hours of serious examination. It's a World War II survival drama, it's a martial art tournament film, and it's a prison escape thriller, all happening inside the same movie simultaneously, often inside the same scene. And the fact that it holds together as well as it does is a kind of remarkable, given that each of those genres has its own tone, its own expectation, its own emotional logic, whether it fully succeeds. And this is the more complicated answer, depend on which parts you are evaluating and which you are giving a pass to. And that's exactly the kind of conversation I want to have with you today. Here's what genuinely frustrates me about the discourse around prisoner of war, and this is why I felt like this video needed to exist and needed to be as thorough as I could make it. Most of the coverage of this film, and there was not as much as it deserved, treated it as a genre item, a Scott Adkins vehicle, a martial arts showcase, and moved on. The critics who reviewed it were fine, the audience score are fine, and then everyone went back to their lives. And I get that in the volume of content that get released every week, a direct to video action film set in World War II does not necessarily scream stop everything and pay attention, but what everyone seemed to miss, or at least not spend enough time on, is that this film was conceived and co-written by Scott Adkins himself, based on a story that he developed, and that context changed everything about how you should read it. This is not just a genre exercise that happened to have Adkins in it. This is a personal creative statement by a man who has been making action films for over 2 decades and who is clearly in this project trying to say something more than he usually get the opportunity to say. When you understand that, the film become more interesting even in its failures, because the failures are the failures of genuine ambition rather than the failures of careless craft. There's also something I want to say about what this movie actually gets right, that most action cinema does not bother with, which is the weight of violence. The fights in Prisoner of War mean something. They exist within a moral framework that the film takes seriously, and that seriousness is rare and valuable and deserve to be talked about properly rather than filled under Adkins kicks guy. Good movie, 4 star next. By the time you finish this video, my genuine goal is that you see this film differently from how you saw it before, whether that means you go back and watch it with fresh eyes or you go watch it for the first time knowing exactly what to look for. I want this to be the conversation about Prisoner of the War that the film deserved to have but mostly did not. Okay, so here's the game plan. We are spending real time on context and background first. Then we are going deep on the cast, and I mean properly deep, especially on Adkins because his career trajectory is genuinely fascinating, and this film is a significant chapter in that trajectory that tells you a lot about where he's been and where he's trying to go. Then a full 3 act story breakdown, not just plot recap but actual analysis of what each act is doing, what works, what does not, and why. Then themes and deeper meaning, because yes, I am going to make you engage with the thematic content of a direct to video martial art film, and I'm not even sorry. Filmmaking, craft, direction, cinematography, score and sound, screenplay, box office and reception, production insight, comparative analysis, placing this film in both its franchise context and its genre context, key scene breakdown for the sequence that I think really define what the film is, Easter eggs and hidden details, controversies and debates, my personal analysis of what worked and did not, legacy and future implications, and then the full final verdict with rating across every category. That's the whole picture. Full spoilers, obviously, from the very beginning. If you want to go in fresh, pause right here. Go watch the film on VOD. It's available pretty much everywhere. Come back, I shall be here. But if you have already seen it or you just want to know if it's worth your time, stay, because I shall tell you very directly. Engage in the comments. I genuinely read them and respond. Tell me if you disagree with me, especially if you disagree with me. And if you are not subscribed yet, the button is right there, and the channel is entirely this kind of long form analysis. So if this is your thing, there's more waiting for you. So let's set that table properly. Prisoner of War was released on VOD in the United States on September 19, 2025 by Well Go USA, which is a distribution company that has a strong track record with action film in this mid-budget tier, and the film had its most significant publicity but earlier in the year on April 3, 2025 with a special screening at the TCL Chinese Theatre in Hollywood hosted by the Beverly Hill Film Festival, and then subsequent festival appearance including the Big Bad Film Fest in Glendale, California in August, and the Sacramento International Film Festival at the California Railroad Museum at the end of that same month. The fact that the film traveled a festival circuit before its commercial release matter because it tells you the people behind it through they had something worth presenting in those contexts, and that self-assessment was not entirely wrong. The UK release was handled by Kaleidoscope Home Entertainment with DVD, Blu-ray and digital available from November 10, 2025. The film was directed by Louis Mandular, and I want to spend a moment on him before we get deeper into the film because his relationship with Adkins is actually central to understanding how this project came together and why it has the specific character it does. Mandylor is primarily known as an actor. He's been in a lot of things over the year, and he made his directional debut or at least his notable directional work with the Debt Collector series, which he made with Adkins, and those films established a working relationship and a mutual understanding of how to make good lean action film with limited sources. The collaboration that produced those films is essentially the same collaboration that produced Prisoner of War, and you can feel that history in how comfortable the film is in its own skin, in how confident Mandylor is about certain things, and how trusting Adkins is in front of his camera. The screenplay was written by Mark Karabinov, and here is the thing that I don't think get enough emphasis in most coverage of this film. The story itself was by Scott Adkins. Adkins conceived this, he developed the core concept and the core narrative. He then brought in Karabinov to develop it into a full screenplay, and that genesis is important for understanding both the film's strengths, which are concentrated in its conception, and its character understanding, and some of its weakness, which tend to be in the areas of screenplay craft and supporting character development that benefit most from a purely rightly eye. The film was originally titled Death March, and that's a reference to the Baton Death March, one of the most documented war crimes of the Second World War, in which Allied prisoners of war, primarily American and Filipino soldiers, were forced to march approximately 65 miles from Baton to prison camps under conditions of deliberate brutality that killed thousands. The decision to rename the film Prisoner of War for its commercial release is interesting to me on multiple levels. On a marketing level, Prisoner of War is a more recognizable and accessible title that does not require historical knowledge to understand. On an artistic level, the shift moved emphasis away from that specific historical atrocity and toward the more intimate, character-focused survival story the film actually tells. Whether that was a right choice is something I shall come back to it in the theme section. The film ran about an hour and 50 minutes. It's rated R. It stars Adkins alongside Peter Shinkoda, Michelle Copon, Donald Kiron, and Gabby Garcia. It received a 67% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 64% audience score, and it has an IMDb rating of 5.7, which I think undersell it significantly, but which reflect the specific way online rating systems skew against films that are not either beloved genre exercise or broadly promoted mainstream releases. My personal anticipation going in was somewhere in the territory of cautious optimism. I have been an Adkins fan for years. I knew he was trying something different with this one, and I was curious whether the ambition matched the execution. The short answer to that curiosity is sometimes yes, sometimes not quite, and the details of that complicated answers are what the next couple of hours are about. Let me start with the thing that everyone who talk about this film start with, and that's Scott Adkins, because honestly there is no other logical beginning for anyone who's somehow arrived at this video without knowing who Adkins is. Let me give you the quick version. He is a British martial artist and actor who has been working in film since the early 2000s, and he is by any serious assessment one of the most physically extraordinary screen performers working in action cinema today, and probably in the last 2 decades. The guy has a background in taekwondo, judo, kickboxing, karate, gymnastics, and several other disciplines. He has spent his career developing a screen fighting style that is genuinely distinctive and that is genuinely beautiful to watch when it's photographed correctly. His mainstream breakthrough was probably the Undisputed series, specifically Undisputed II and Triple I, where he played the Russian villain turned conflicted champion Yuri Boyka, a character that developed such a dedicated following that they eventually built a whole spin off franchise around him. After that, he went through a period of prolific output, sometime appearing in better projects, sometime in things that were less worthy of his talent, and then he had a stretch in the mid to late 2010 of appearing in bigger Hollywood films, Doctor Strange, IP Man 4, John Wick Chapter 4, where he did genuinely impressive work in smaller roles but never quite broke through 10 the kind of mainstream leading man status and his talent arguably warranted. And here's the thing about Adkins that I think is actually quite interesting and that prices of are directly engaged with, which is the question of whether he can anchor a film on more than just physical performance. Because if you are honest about this filmography, the films that really work are the ones where the physical performance are matched by stories and character that give those performances meaning. Boyka work as a character not just because Adkins is extraordinary to watch fight, but because there are genuine moral and spiritual arc to the character that makes the physical journey meaningful. And Prisoner of War is, in my reading, the most direct attempt Adkins has made to answer the question of whether he can drive a film dramatically as well as physically, and the answer, as I shall keep returning to, is a complicated but mostly affirmative yes. The casting of Peter Shinkoda as the film's primary antagonist, Lieutenant Colonel Ito, is the single best known Adkins decision to the film makes, and I want to make absolutely sure this does not get lost. Shinkoda has appeared in various film and television projects, including Daredevil on Netflix, but this is probably the most substantial villainous role he's been given, and what he does with is genuinely impressive. He brings this very specific quality to Ito, which is the quality of constant institutional manners, the manners of a man who uses system and structure to do violence rather than doing it in a raw emotional eruption. And that kind of villain is often harder to make work on screen than the bombastic theatrical kind because it requires the actor to do most of their work enough restraint rather than expression. Shinkoda does it impassively. Donald Kieran play Captain Collins, and this casting choice is the one I want to engage with most carefully because it provokes the most genuinely interesting discussion about what casting is for in an action. The film of this kind, Caron is primarily known as legendary MMA fighter. He competed for years in the UFC at various weight classes and was known for finishing fight with dramatic knockout and submission, and his acting experience is limited. So going in, if you are expecting a sporting performance that adds dramatic complexity or scene-stealing energy to the film, you are going to be somewhat let down. That's just honest. Caron works within a pretty narrow range as a performer, but I want to make an argument for why the casting functions anyway, and it's this. Colin as a character is written as a capable but not exceptional soldier, a man who is reliable but who defers to better people when the situation goes beyond his capacity. And Caron's natural screen presence, his unpretentious, no nonsense physicality, his sense of being a man who has genuinely been hit many times and accepted it, all of that matches what Colin is on the page in a way that a more conventionally trained actor might not have provided through artifice. He looks like a man who has been in real combat because he has been in real combat, and that physical truth comes through on a screen. He is not a great actor, but he is in a specific and meaningful sense right for what he is playing. Gabby Garcia plays Thasia, the Filipino nurse, and Michelle Copon play Valenovia, and both of these performers deserve individual attention that the film itself unfortunately does not give them, and I shall get into the specifics of what their characters should have been versus what they are in the character section. What I want to say about the casting character section overall is that there is a clear hierarchy of investment in this film's casting work, meaning that enormous attention was paid to who plays Wright and who plays Ito, and significantly less attention to developing the others into fully realized characters, and that asymmetry is the casting director's decision made flesh. James Wright is a fascinating character study because he is simultaneously a very conventional action film protagonist in terms of his surface action and a more interesting character study than his general role requires him to be, and that tension is present throughout the film. On the surface, Wright is what you expect, skilled, principled, and the man is the room that everyone else look to when things get serious, processing backstory that gives him a specific physical advantage in the story's specific conflict. He is a British RAF wing commander. He trained in martial art in Hong Kong before the war, and he is now in a situation where those skills are being weaponized against him by the very system that has captured him. That's a solid setup for an action protagonist. It's a clean and functional and give you everything you need to follow the story. But here's what I find genuinely interesting about Wright that goes beyond that surface functionality, and this is where I think the character is more thoughtful than first impression suggests. Wright is an military officer and the ethos of a military officer in a prisoner of war situation, as developed through historical account and as the film correctly implies, is resist, survive, escape. Don't give comfort or assistance to the enemy. Don't participate in their systems. Maintain unit cohesion and wait for opportunity. That's the framework. Now, at the same time, Wright has a martial art background rooted in traditions that have very specific philosophical content about the relationship between practitioner and combat, about respect and discipline and the ethics of violence, and these two frameworks are in direct conflict the moment Ito starts using the fight match as a management and entertainment tool, because every time a prisoner steps into those matches and performs, the system wins something even if the prisoner wins the fight, and the question of whether Wright's participation constitutes resistance or compliance, whether he can use the system against itself or whether using it all mean being used by it, is the actual moral engine of the story. Adkins plays this tension with a subtlety that I think gets underrated because it's expressed through physical performance and facial work rather than dialogue. Watch his eyes in the fight scene, particularly the early one. There's calculation there, yes, because he's assessing opponents and planning sequence, but there's also something that reads as a conflict, as someone who is doing something that goes them in a way that is not physical, and then watch how that expression shifts over the course of the film as he accepts more and then pushes past acceptance into something more active. That arc is the film's character arc and is performed rather than stated, and that's the kind of acting I have real respect for regardless of genre context. His best moment, and I shall get into it more in the scene breakdown, is actually a quiet one, a nighttime conversation with Villanova that has nothing to do with fighting and everything to do with what it means to hold on to yourself when the environment is designed specifically to take that way. In that scene, Adkins does something remarkable, which is that he let Wright be uncertain, not temporarily uncertain before resolution, but genuinely uncomfortably uncertain, and you can see the weight of everything he is carrying in how still he holds himself while Copon's character speak to him. It's a real performance and it comes from somewhere real, and I think it shows you what Adkins is capable of when he has the material and the space to do it. His weakest moments are the passages where the screenplay asks him to be more conventionally heroic, to anchor the ensemble and project confidence for the benefit of the group, because in those moments the script is serving the genre rather than the character, and Adkins the performer is slightly less interesting when he is in pure movie hero mode than where he is being allowed to be complicated. Peter Shinkoda's Lieutenant Colonel Ito is the kind of antagonist that a film like this need to function on any level above pure genre exercise, and he delivered that necessity in full. Let me explain what I mean by the kind of antagonist this film needs. War film and prisoner of war film have a specific challenge with their antagonists that different from other genre, and it's this. The antagonist in a power setting has institutional power, meaning they control the space, the resources, the consequences, and the lives of the prisoners entirely, so the physical threat level is always already established without needing to be demonstrated through individual action. What makes a great war film antagonist is not additional demonstrations of power, it's the texture of how they exercise the power they already have, because that texture tells you who they are and what the system is, and Shinkoda understands this completely. What makes Ito interesting, and what I want to credit both Shinkoda's performance and whatever in the screenplay gave him the material to work with, is that he's not simply cruel. Cruelty without ideology is just sadism, and it's make for a dramatically thin villain. Ito has an ideology, he has a worldview within which the brutality of the camp is not random violence but purposeful and justified enforcement of a particular vision of order and hierarchy. The fight matches, in his conception, are not entertainment for its own sake, they are demonstrations of a worldview. They are showing the prisoners and himself that the order he repeats is real and that physical reality confirms it. That's more frightening conception of villainy than pure sadism, because it has internal logic that can sustain itself even under challenge. The moment where Shinkoda lets you see cracks in that construction, and there are few are the most interesting moments in his performance. There are scenes mid-film where Ito watches Bright fight and something move across his face that is not the usual cold satisfaction but something more like recognition, and that flicker, brief and never explained in dialogue, tells you that Ito understands Wright in a way he does not understand most of the prisoners, and that understanding complicates his relationship to destroying him. Great antagonists always have something that complicates their antagonism in ways that make the conflict richer than simple opposition, and Shinkoda's performance finds that thing and uses it well. Comparing him to great film villain in a broader sense, he is in the lineage of the contained institutional villain rather than the theoretical one, and in that lineage I had put him alongside characters like the colonel in Bridge on the River Kawai or the commandant in The Great Escape, figure whose minions come from their absolute authority over a closed system rather than from any individual act of violence. He is not at the level of those characters in terms of the screenplay's development of him, but the performance aspires to that company. Villanova, Michael Compound's character, is the supporting player who I think the film loses the most by not developing more fully, and I want to explain why I feel that strongly. Copon has real energy on screen. He brings the kind of physical and emotional aliveness to his scene that make you interested in him, and his chemistry with Adkins in the scene they share is genuine and warm in a way that suggests both actors found something serious problem, and I want to be direct about why. She is a Philippine woman who is being forced to provide medical services to a camp that is actively oppressing that people for her country. That is in historical terms and in simple human terms. An extraordinary situation that contains enormous emotional and thematic richness. She is not an outsider to this history the way the Allied prisoners are. She is a native of the country being occupied. She has a personal stake in the outcome that is both more intimate and more politically resonant than anything Wright or Collins carry into the story, and the film barely gives her room to express any of that. She appears in a handful of scenes. She provides medical supplies. She has a few moments of warmth with Wright that gesture toward something deeper without ever developing it. And then the film moves on. Garcia is compelling in every second she is on screen, and there are moments, specifically a look she gives in the background of a scene I am thinking of in the camp's medical area, where you can see her playing a character with a full interior life that the camera never quite turns toward. That's a film at its most frustrating, not when it's bad, but when can you see what it could have been and choose not to be. Captain Collins, Caron's character, sits in the film as the practical man of action who balances Wright's more individually focused perspective with the broader sense of unit survival and command responsibility, and within that functional role Caron delivers what the film needs even if he cannot deliver more than that. His best moments are physical, unsurprisingly, because his screen presence is most persuasive when it's expressing something through the body rather than through dialogue. The scene where Collins and Wright are making plans together has a pragmatic shorthand between the two characters that actually work quite well. A sense of two men who respect each other's different kinds of competence, and Caron and Adkins find that shorthand naturally. The ensemble chemistry conservation in an action film like this require a different framework than you had applied to a drama or a romantic comedy, because the kind of chemistry that make action film ensemble work is not primarily about interpersonal sparkle. It's about shared weight, the sense that these people have endured something together, that the silences between them carry history, that they do not need to explain everything to each other because they have been in the dark together. And on that specific dimension, the cast of Prisoner of War delivers something genuine. There are group scenes, quite one where the cast just occupies a space together, and the quality of that occupying feels lived in and true, and you cannot create that through individual performance. It required the cast to have spent time together building something, and it seems they did. Adkins and Caron's relationship translate from what were apparently genuine on-set connections into something that works on screen. They feel like two men who have genuinely sat together in comfortable circumstances and decided to trust each other, which is exactly what Collins and Wright are supposed to be. The broader ensemble, the group of prisoners as a community rather than just as named characters, is handled with enough care in the background that the camp feels populated rather than just decorated, and that population makes the stakes feel more real. What the film does not attempt, and what would have made it something more than it is true ensemble storytelling where multiple characters carry the story with equal weight. This is fundamentally a star vehicle. Everything moves through and return to right, and that structure limits how much the supporting cast can contribute to the film's emotional life. The most successful ensemble war film and Inglorious Bastards and The Dirty Dozen come to mind use the ensemble form to create a richer emotional world than any individual protagonist can carry. Prisoner of war make different choices and those choices have course. The film opened in a way that I think is genuinely smart, that set expectations for a film more ambitious than it consistently delivers. And I want to spend real time on this opening because it does a lot of work that the rest of the film builds on. We don't start in 1942, we start in what feels like a present day or near present day moment in a Japanese martial art dojo run by the son of the man who will be Wright's primary antagonist throughout the film. Adkins walks into the dojo with the controlled physicality of a man who knows exactly what he is walking into and has prepared for every possibility, and the scene that follows a charged confrontation that tells you the full weight of a history between these two lineages without a world of explicit exposition is the best written and best directed scene in the entire film. What I love about this opening is what it refuses to do, which is explain itself. You are not told who Wright is, you are not told where he came from, or what he wants, or what his relationship to this dojo and this young man is. You are shown a physical reality, a man walking into enemy adjacent territory with calm deliberation and trusted to feel the significance of that before understanding it. That trust in the audience is exactly the kind of filmmaking I respond to, and it makes the subsequent hour and 40 minutes of flashback feel like a journey with a destination rather than a sequence of events with an uncertain endpoint. Then we cut to 1942 and we are in the Philippines in the Battle of Bataan, and the film establishes its historical context with efficiency and visual intelligence. Wright is shot down, he is captured, he is processed into the camp, and within the first 15 to 20 minutes you understand everything you need to understand about the world, about the film's world. The camp is brutal, the hierarchy is clear, the conditions are designed to degrade and demoralize, and Ito commands this space with a particular brand of cold authority that you feel in every choice about how the space is organized and who moves through it how. What the film does well in these early setup sequence is ground you in the physical reality before asking you to engage with the moral and thematic questions. You feel the heat and the dust and the hunger before you are asked to think about what it means to survive in this environment without losing yourself, and that grounding is essential for everything that follows. The foreshadowing in these early scenes is precise and rewards rewatching. There are moments where Wright watches Koji, one of the camp's established fighters, in a match before Wright has been pulled into the system himself, and the way Adkins plays that watching scene is loaded with exactly the kind of information the character would be gathering. He is assessing reach and technique and habits, yes, but he is also assessing something about what kind of man Koji is. Koji is what he is making of the situation he is in, whether he is a man who has accepted the camp storm or whether there is something else happening behind those eyes. That scene is doing double work. It's establishing the world and its revealing characters, and the economy of it is good writing. The second act of this film is where everything that's interesting about its conception comes into sharpest focus, and also where the gap between ambition and execution is most visible. And I want to walk you through why both of those things are true. The central engine of the second act is the fight matches Wright being drawn progressively deeper into the camp's underground tournament system. And what I think the film does that's genuinely unusual and brave is refuse to let those fights be straightforwardly triumphant. This is not a tournament film where winning is the goal. It's a film where the question of whether you should be playing the game at all is present in every single fight, and that ethical undercurrent gives the physical sequence a layer of meaning that most martial art films simply don't have. The best example of this and the sequence I had point to as the film's artistic peak is the build up to and execution of the Koji fight, which I shall discuss in more detail in the scene breakdown section. But even before that, the earlier fights are short and performed in way that insist on complication. Wright wins turn, and those wins are technically impressive in the way Adkins fight always are when they are filmed properly, but the aftermath of each one is handled with a restraint that keep the moral weight present. You are not supposed to feel triumphant when Wright walks away from a fight. You are supposed to feel the cost, and the film is deliberate about making you feel it. The subplot involving Theresia's medical assistants develop in the second act, and I want to be clear that the scenes between Garcia and Adkins are genuinely warm and suggest a relationship with more depth than the film gives it time to develop. There is a quiet competence to those scenes, a sense of two people operating in a high stakes environment and finding a specific kind of trust within it. And if the film had devoted more time to that relationship and what it means for both characters, it would have been emotionally richer in its climax. Instead, these scenes feel like markers of a relationship rather than the relationship itself. Colin's revelation that the prisoner will be transferred to a worse camp within a week is the structural fulcrum of the second act. The moment the film shifts its genre register from survival drama toward escape thriller, and this is where I start to see the seams. The ticking clock device is classical and functional, and the film uses it without embarrassment. But the transition from the moral and psychological territory of the fight sequence to the logistical problem solving of escape planning requires a tonal adjustment that is not entirely smooth. The camp sequence have a kind of claustrophobic intimacy. Every decision weighted with sequence, every interaction carrying the pressure of the larger situation. The planning sequence are necessarily more expository and procedural, and the film has not found a way to maintain the earlier sequence emotional intensity during the mechanical business of setting up the escape. It's not a fatal transition, but it's a noticeable one. The radio scene where Wright steals and uses camp communication equipment to reach US forces is the moment the film's investment in internal logic most visibly strains. I understand the narrative function of the scene. It's necessary to set up the climax timing mechanism, but the ease with which it happens, the clarity of the signal, the responsiveness of the US forces, the specific operational coordination it implies feels like a different kind of movie logic than what the film has established in its first hour. A grittier screenplay would have found a more credible solution or would have framed the improbability of the communication as part of the desperate gamble the characters are taking rather than as a given. As it stands, it's the moment the film's tonal integrity cracks most visibly. The third act arrives with the promise of a double payoff, the escape and the final confrontation, and delivers on those promises with different level of satisfaction. Let me start with the escape itself. The timing of the escape to coincide with the US air raid is a solid structural device, and the physical execution of the escape, the body is in motion through a hostile environment, the small moment of heroism and horror that a prison break entails is handled with real competence by Mandler. The action in this sequence has a messiness that distinguishes it from the more aesthetically choreographed fight sequence earlier in the film, and that distinction is exactly right because the escape is desperate and chaotic in a way the fight for all their brutality are not. The fates of the supporting characters in the third act are where the film's underdevelopment of those characters most visibly caused it. When something significant happened to Villanova, and I shall let you find out specifically what the emotional register of that moment should be devastating given how much time we have spent with him. Instead, it felt as significant but not quite devastating because the film has not fully made us believe in Villeneuve as a full person. You feel the loss in principle before you feel it in the gut, which is the wrong order for these things to arrive in. That's the clearest single consequence of the screenplay's failure to develop its supporting character. The final confrontation between Wright and Ito is earned in a way the escape mechanics are not quite because the film has been building that specific antagonism across the entire runtime through careful, patient work, and when the confrontation arrives, it has the weight of everything that preceded it. I will not describe the specific, but I will say the physical choreography is designed to express something about where both characters are at this point in the story. And that's the kind of fight choreography I most respect, the kind that tells you who the people are rather than just when they can do. The return to the present day dojo in the film's final scene is genuinely its best dramatic moment, and I want to give that its proper credit. The conversation between Wright and Ito's son in the space brings together every thematic thread the film has been developing: the inheritance of violence, the question of whether enmity can end or whether it just changes hand across generation, the possibility of something that is not forgiveness but it perhaps recognition. It's handled with real subtlety and it elevates the film's final impression in a way the preceding climax alone would not have managed. What this movie is really about, and I want to be as clear as I can about this because it's easy to miss under the fighting and the period setting is the relationship between violence and dignity, specifically whether a person can maintain their sense of self, their moral integrity, their humanity when they are placed inside a system of explicitly designed to strip all of those things from them through the mechanism of violence. That's the thematic heart of this film, and it's an interesting question that a lot of more prestigious cinema engage with and that most action cinema ignore entirely. The fact that Prisoner of War takes it seriously even when it does not always have the craft to follow through on all the implications put it in a genuinely different category from the genre it superficially resembles. Wright's dilemma is not, and this is important, a physical one. He is capable of handling himself physically. The challenge he faces is not whether he can survive the fights, but whether engaging in the fight system at all constitutes a kind of defeat that the camp commanders are winning regardless of the outcome inside the ring. Because here's the thing about those matches is every time a prisoner performs for the captors entertainment, the captors win something. The system validates itself, the hierarchy asserts itself, the degradation occurs whether the prisoner wins or loses, and Wright's navigation of that dynamic, his evolving relationship to his own participation is where the film does its most interesting thematic work. The film explores this primarily through Wright's performance in the fights themselves, through the contrast between the clinical, calculating control he exercises in the ring and the cost that control extracts from him, which you read in the after fight moments, and it explores it through the Koji fight specifically, which is the sequence where the thematic content is most directly expressed through physical action. The encounter where two men with genuine respect for each other are forced to violate the ethics of the tradition they both practice in service of a system neither of them caused. The historical context of this film is not a neutral backdrop, and I want to engage with that carefully because it deserves more than the quick mention it tends to get. The Battle of Bataan, the prisoner of war camp, the Bataan Death March, these are documented historical atrocities with real victims and a real historical weight, and choosing to set an action film against that background create responsibilities that the film meet with varying success. What it does right, the conditions of the camp are depicted with genuine grimness. The forced labor and the starvation and casual violence are not sanitized or made photogenic, and the film does not pretend that what was happening to allied prisoners in these camps was anything other than a systematic war crime. That honesty is important, and I respect the film for it. What is significantly more complicated, the film's relationship to the Filipino historical experience is, to be plain about it, inadequate. The Philippines and its people were the primary victims of the Japanese occupation, not incidental ones. Filipino soldiers and civilians suffered enormously under the occupation. The Death March primarily killed Filipino soldiers, and the broader context of the occupation included mass civilian casualties and atrocities that dwarf the Allied prisoner experience in scale. The film knows this in the sense that it includes Thalia and Gester at her position as a colonized person forced to serve her own country's occupiers, but it does not do the work to make that perspective real and present in the narrative. And when you have a film explicitly set in this historical moment that center British and American perspectives almost exclusively, while using a Filipino character as a support function, that's a representational choice that deserves to be named and discussed honestly. I want to be clear that naming this as a problem does not lead me to condemning the film, because films can have real blind spots and still have real value, and Prisoner of War does have real value. But the most thoughtful engagement with this film requires acknowledging what it chooses not to look at and who it implicitly asks to be the protagonist of a history that belongs to multiple people. There are genuine symbolic threads running through Prisoner of War that I think are largely invisible on first viewing, but that add real texture when you look for them. The most consistent one is the inversion of the martial art tradition itself. Martial arts, particularly the Eastern discipline the film is drawing on, have philosophical roots in ideas about discipline, honor, the ethical use of force, the relationship between practitioner and opponent as one of the mutual respect. The camp's fight system is a deliberate corruption of all of that, using the form of martial tradition while inverting its ethics, and Wright's participation in that corrupted form while trying to maintain the integrity of what he learned is a sustained metaphor for the film's larger theme about surviving dehumanization without being dehumanized. The visual motif around hand is subtler but worth noting. Hands that train and fight, hands that heal and help, and the distinction between them runs through the film in ways that you might not consciously register but that shape the emotional register of different scenes. The fight sequence focuses on hands as weapon. The medical scene focuses on hands as instruments of care, and that contrast is doing thematic work about the choice every person in the camp is constantly making about what they use their capacity for. Color and light are used with more deliberateness than the film's budget type usually allows. The camp sequences are consistently desaturated, dusty, drained of vitality, and within that palette, the film reserves its slightly warmer tones for moments of genuine human connection. The quieter scenes, the conversation, the moments where people treat each other as people, it's subtle enough that you might not notice it consciously, but you feel the difference, and feeling the difference is the point. I want to be genuine with you about the emotional experience of watching this film because I think it's the dimension that divides viewers most completely. If you watch action films primarily on the level of physical spectacle and genre player, Prisoner of War will satisfy you in the specific way it's designed to satisfy you. But if you are coming looking for a film that makes you feel something more than adrenaline, the results are uneven and honesty requires acknowledging that. The film's most emotionally effective passages are consistently its quietest one, and that's not a coincidence. The barracks conversation, the aftermath of the Koji fight, the final dojo scene, the moment before the major character's fate is decided in the third act. These are the sequences where the film reaches for and often achieves genuine emotional impact, and they achieve it through the specific quality of restraint and authentic performance. Adkins carrying weight slightly, Shinkoda's controlled manners becoming complicated for just a moment, Copon looking at the world with the simple directness of someone who might not get to look at it much longer. The moments where the film loses me emotionally are the more conventionally dramatic ones. The scene where the screenplay asks characters to be explicit about what they feel and what it means, because in those moments the film trusts itself slightly less and reaches for the familiar emotional shortcut of the genre rather than the more vulnerable territory it finds in its best scene. Louis Mandler's direction of Prisoner of War is a study in what you can achieve when you know your material and know your collaborator well, and also in what you lose when you are more confident in some areas of a film than others. Let me start with what works because it deserves genuine credit. Mandler understands martial art cinema viscerally in a way a craft person understands their specific tools, and that understanding is present in every fight sequence in the film. He knows where to put the camera, he knows how long to hold a shot before cutting, he knows the difference between making action legible and making it spectacular, and how to achieve both simultaneously. The fight choreography in Prisoner of War is a collaborative achievement between Mandler's direction, Adkins' performance, and physical direction of the sequence, stunt coordinator Stephen Rennie, and fight choreographer Alvin Hessing, but it's Mandler who makes the final decisions about how it's choreographed and assembled, and those decisions are consistently good. In the dramatic scenes, the confidence is slightly different. They are not poorly directed, but they are less specifically directed, and by that I mean you can feel in certain dramatic passages that Mandler is giving his actor space to do their work and then capturing it competently rather than imposing a specific visual intelligence on the scene the way he does on the action sequence. That's not inherently wrong as a directorial approach. It's the approach of a director who trusts his actors, and Adkins and Shinkoda are trustworthy, but the best dramatic film and the best sequence in the best dramatic film have a visual language that as a specific as their action counterparts, and Prisoner of War is slightly less interesting to look at when nobody is fighting. His management of the film's tone, meaning the balance between the grimness of the war film elements and the general pleasure of the martial arts sequence is mostly well handled, and that's actually the trickiest thing he has to do on this film, because getting that balance wrong in either direction would break the movie. Too much grimness and it stopped being entertaining. Too much genre player and the historical weight evaporate and everything feels false. Mandler find the balance about 80% of the time, and the remaining 20% is where the tonal inconsistencies I have mentioned elsewhere show through. The visual work in Prisoner of War is generally more sophisticated than its distribution ties suggest, and I want to take him to make that case specifically because it's easy to walk away from a VOD action film without really thinking about its visual language. The choice to shoot the camp in a heavily desaturated, dusty palette is a commitment, meaning the cinematographer maintained that palette consistency across all the interior camp spaces and through the duration of the film, and consistency of this kind requires discipline and intention rather than just a single filter applied in post. Within that palette, there are specifically composed frames, particularly in the fight sequence, where the geometry of the space, the camp structure, and benches and walls is used to contain characters within the frame in way that reinforce the thematic content about captivity and control. The most impressive technical achievement in the cinematography is the fight sequence work, specifically the commitment to wider frame and longer take that let you see bodies in space and follow choreography as a coherent physical logic. This is not the standard in modern action cinema. The standard is closer, tighter, faster, rapid cutting that create a sense of kinetic energy even if it destroys spatial logic. And it's the lazy approach because it hides the limitations of stunt performance who are not as skilled as Adkins. The decision to film Adkins fights the way you had film a great dancer or a great athlete with frames wide enough to show the full body and cuts trimmed to the logic of the movement rather than to some editor's arbitrary rhythm is the right decision, and it results in action sequence that you can actually read and that reward repeated viewing in a way that rapid cut action never does. The lighting design in the interior spaces uses natural looking sources, torch light and filtered daylight in way that maintain period authenticity while serving the visual storytelling. The scenes set at night in the barracks have a quality of genuine darkness, not the movie darkness that just slightly desaturated blue, but actual dark with specific pools of available light, and that darkness makes the quieter scenes feel more intimate and more real than they would in more conventionally lit spaces. The score for Prisoner of War is one of the film's underrated success, and I want to give it proper credit because it's doing something that's both difficult and important, which is supporting the film's emotional content without overwhelming it. The great challenge of scoring this kind of film is not writing memorable theme, though there are some. It's calibrating the emotional temperature of scene through music in way that amplify what's already there rather than creating the emotion from scratch. And the composer understood this challenge and met it. The fight sequence and deliberately underscored in many passages, meaning the ambient sound of the fight itself the physical impacts, the breathing and grunting of combat. The crowd noise are allowed to dominate rather than being buried under swelling music. That choice keeps the fights grounded and real in a way that heavily scored action sequences often are not, because silence or near silence in a fight scene requires the physical reality to carry the emotional weight. And when the physical reality is as good as it is in this film, it can do that. The music comes in when it means something, when the emotional temperature of a scene specifically need reinforcing, and that restraint makes the moment when the score does well feel earned rather than routine. The sound design, more broadly, is first-rate, period-appropriate ambient sound, the physical specificity of camp life, the sound of writing that feel real rather than exaggerated in the way Hollywood action sound effects often are. All of it contribute to the tactile reality that cinematography is creating visually. The screenplay is both the film's most interesting creating document and the place where its most significant problem originates, and that coexistence is actually quite common with films born from passion projects, because passion and craft are different things and having the first does not guarantee having the second. What Mark Klebunov, working from Adkins' story, gets right. The structural ambition, the thematic content, the character of Wright in both his action hero function and his more complicated interior life, and the antagonist construction of Ito. These are the things a good story instinct produce, and they are generally present here. What's less consistently achieved, the dialogue, which is uneven in quality across the film, with some passages that are economical and characterful and others that slip into the expository mode, where characters are explaining the situation to each other more for the audience benefit than because two people in that situation would say those things. The supporting character development, which is the film's clearest structural weakness and which reflects either a decision that the story should stay tightly focused on right, or a failure to recognize that the emotional climax needs more than one character to carry it, and the escape mechanics, which are the passages where the screenplay most clearly reaches for genre convention rather than the more specific character driven solution than the first act promises. The screenplay structure itself, the present day framing device that bookends the main story, is one of its best ideas and is executed well enough that it does the work the frame needs to do, which is to give the main story a retrospective context and a thematic destination. Not every film that uses a frame achieves this. Some use it purely structurally without the frame itself adding meaning, and Prisoner of the War does better than that. The commercial story of Prisoner of War is the commercial story of a well executed direct to video action film into 2025, and understanding that story requires some context about how the direct to video market works now versus how it worked a decade ago. Belgo USA releasing this on VOD on September 19, 2025, following the festival screenings earlier in the year, is the standard life cycle for a film of this type and budget, and a life cycle that has become genuinely respectable in a way that was not true in the era when direct to video mean that film was not good enough for theaters. The theatrical dimension of this film is real but limited, with special screenings at festivals and limited venues rather than wide release, and the audience for Scott Adkins film is an international one that is well served by the VOD model. Valgo USA specifically has developed expertise in reaching the martial art film audience through digital platform, and they know how to position and promote a film like this to find its audience. The film appears to have found that audience. The view volume across platforms including IMDb, Letterboxd, Rotten Tomatoes, and Prime Video suggest a genuine engagement from the action film community that went beyond cursory views. The commercial context also include the UK release through Kaleidoscope Home Entertainment in November 2025 for physical and digital distribution, which suggests a recognition that the European action film market, where Adkins has a strong and loyal following due to his British background, was worth a specific release strategy. The financial detail of its production budget and return are not public, but USA's track record suggests they do not release film they are not confident will make money, and their confidence in this one is evident from the visible release support. The critical response to Prisoner of War ended up at 67% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I find to be an accurate thermometer of the film's overall quality, and I want to say that in a good way. That score represents a consensus that the film is generally good in specific ways and generally limited in other, and that's an honest assessment rather than a dismissal. The RogerAbbott.com review by Simon Abrams called the film a showcase for Adkins' action prowess, which is accurate as far as it goes, but which I think sells short the thematic ambition and the dramatic work Adkins is doing beyond the action sequence. The consistent critical praise landed on the fight sequence, with specific mention of the decision to film them in wider frame with longer takes. On Adkins' performance overall as among his strongest recent work, and on Shinkoda's antagonist as effectively realized. The consistent critical criticisms landed on the supporting character underdevelopment, the uneven pacing in the second half, and the escape plot mechanics that strain credibility. Several critics noted the film's historical setting give the action unusual weight, which is the observation I had most echo and most want to build on. Where I diverge from the critical consensus is in the weight I had give the film's thematic content, which I think is more substantive than most reviewers gave it credit for, and in my assessment of the screenplay's ambition, which deserve acknowledgement even where execution falls short. The audience response is more divided than the critics, which I think reflect the specific expectation that different members of the Adkins fan base bring to his film. The audience score of 64% lower the critic score suggests that a meaningful portion of viewers came away less satisfied than the critics did, and the reasons cluster around the same issues. Some viewers wanted more fighting and felt the escape plot elements diluted the tournament concept that the first act set up so effectively. Some viewers came expecting the grim unrelenting war drama that the title and premise suggest, and found the action film elements occasionally at odds with that expectation. The viewers who loved it, and there are genuinely enthusiastic defenders on Letterboxd and IMDb, tend to be people who appreciated the genre blending, specifically who thought the historical setting gave a film a moral seriousness unusual in martial arts cinema, and who found Adkins' dramatic performance here to be a genuine evolution. There was a specific social media movement around the Koji fight that circulated in action film communities as an example of how to film martial arts properly, which is exactly the kind of specific prize from knowledgeable viewers that a film like this should be aiming for. The production of Prisoner of War is interesting precisely because of the resourcefulness required to make a film set in World War II at this budget level without the result looking cheap or compromised. The decision to anchor the film primarily in the single location of the POW camp is the clearest example of how the filmmaker turned a budget constraint into an aesthetic and thematic asset because confinement in a single space is the perfect visual expression of what captivity is, and the camp setting allows the film to maintain period authenticity in a contained way that multiple locations would have made exponentially more difficult and expensive to sustain. The festival circuit journey the film took before commercial release, from Beverly Hill to Glendale to Sacramento, suggests an investment in building genuine awareness and reputation rather than just dropping the film into the VOD ecosystem and hoping the Adkins fan base shows up. That investment reflects a belief in the film's quality that turned out to be at least partially justified by the reception it received. The practical versus digital effect balance skews heavily toward practical, and this is the right choice both financially and aesthetically. The camp environment, the period costumes and props, the physical reality of the setting all feel convincingly real because they are real rather than constructed in post, and that physical reality is what makes the action sequence feel as grounded as they do. The fight choreography itself is practical in the deepest sense, meaning Adkins and his scene partners are doing real things in front of real cameras in real spaces, and that reality comes through on screen in a way that even the best digital effect cannot replicate. The preparation work that went into Prisoner of War on the performance side is one of his genuine strengths, and Adkins' specific preparation for this role represents something more than standard martial art practice. The choreography for this film had to account for the specific historical and cultural context of the fighting styles involved, including the Filipino martial art arnis and scrimia that appear in certain sequences, which required research and engagement with practitioners of those traditions rather than simply deploying the contemporary martial arts vocabulary Adkins has developed over his career. That kind of specific preparation matters because it's visible in the authenticity of the physical work. Shinkoda's preparation for Ito seems to have been grounded in research into the psychology of institutional authority in wartime contexts and the specificity of his performance, the particular quality of his relationship to violence as administrative rather than emotional suggests someone who thought carefully about what makes this kind of antagonist work. The on-set dynamics between the main cast clearly produce something that goes beyond individual preparation, the sense of genuine familiarity and history that the ensemble scenes carry, and that kind of collective preparation is something directors facilitate or don't facilitate, and Mandela clearly facilitated it here. Placing Prisoner of War within Scott Adkins' filmography requires an honest assessment of what the filmography contains and what the standards are. Adkins has made over 70 films, which is an extraordinary number and which produce the predictable result of a catalogue that range very widely in quality. The undisputed film, specifically the one where he plays Boyka, remain the pinnacle for most of his fans and represent the kind of genre filmmaking that a star vehicle action series can achieve at its best. Below that are films like Amusement, his most critically acclaimed recent work, a lean, brutal British crime film that showed genuine dramatic range and that many critics used as evidence that Adkins could do more than martial art film. Then there are the debt collector films, the collaboration with Mandler, which are likable and well made within their genre limits. Then there is a large middle section of films that are fine, functional, entertaining enough, and then a lower section that we don't need to spend time on. Where does Prisoner of War sit? I had put it in the upper tier of his recent work, comparable to or slightly below Avengement in terms of overall craft quality and significantly above the middle section of his catalogue. What it does that nothing else in his filmography quite does is use a historical context to give physical action dramatic weight in a sustained way, and that's a genuine achievement even if the film does not fully capitalize on all its opportunities. In terms of the specific performance, this is probably Adkins' most complete dramatic turn in a film that's primarily an action vehicle, and that's saying something meaningful for a career that has produced genuinely impressive physical work. In the broader landscape of martial arts cinema and World War II cinema, Prisoner of War is genuinely unusual in a way that deserves recognition even when the execution is not fully realized. The martial art tournament film has its own rich canon from Enter the Dragon in 1973 through the Bloodsport film through the Undisputed series, and those films have convention and player and expectation that the general audience bring to them. The World War II Po film has its own canon from The Great Escape to Bridge on the River Kwai to Stage 17 to The Deer Hunter in certain of its sequence, and those films have their own convention and expectation and emotional texture. What Prisoner of War is attempting is a genuine synthesis of these two canons, and that synthesis is rare enough that the film occupies a genuinely novel space. The film that come closest to what it's attempting are probably smaller, less well-known films rather than the genre classics, films that have tried to bring martial arts choreography into historical conflict setting, and in that smaller category, Prisoner of War is at or near the top. The question of whether it belongs in the conversation with the great film of either of its parent genre is harder, and the honest answer is not quite, primarily because those films have character depth and consequence that Prisoner of War aspires to but does not fully achieve, but aspiring to that company is itself worth something, and the film's best moments are genuinely in conversation with the best of both traditions. The opening dojo sequence is the best written and best directed 3 to 4 minutes in the entire film, and the reason it works so well is that it accomplishes three distinct things simultaneously without feeling crowded or rushed. It establishes Wright as a character through pure physical presence and behavior before a world of exposition has been spoken. It creates the story's thematic frame, the question of how violence between people reverberates through time and across generations, and it established the film's emotional destination before the journey toward it began. Adkins walking into that space is one of the best interns he's had in his career, genuinely, because he's not being asked to demonstrate physical skill, he's being asked to communicate history and weight and intention through the simple act of moving through a doorway, and he does it beautifully. The short composition in this scene uses the dojo's geometric space, the lines of the mats, the placement of Patrikios to position Adkins as both central and, interestingly, slightly off balance within the frame, as though his presence in this space is an intrusion that the space itself is resisting. Whether that's directional intention or happy accident, it works. The first time Wright participate in the camp matches, the film uses the fight to do something more interesting than a standard action introduction sequence, and I want to be specific about what that something is. The setup to the fight is careful and deliberate. The reluctance, the pressure, the moment of apparent decision, and all of that establish the moral context that the fight itself then has to carry, and what the fight carries in Adkins' performance and in Mandler's filming of it is the sense of a man doing something with his full capability, that he has profound reservation about doing. The physical execution is clean and impressive, of course, but the camera keeps returning to right face in brief cutaway that allow you to read the conflict behind the efficiency. The aftermath, the silence after the fight end, is the most important part of the sequence, and the shot of Wright walking away from the ring while Ito watched with that expression of cold satisfaction is doing more thematic work than most of the film's dialogue. I have called this the artistic peak of the film, and I want to justify that claim in detail because it's specific argument rather than a general compliment. Koji is established in the film as a genuine martial artist, not a thug or a camp enforcer, but someone who has his own code and his own relationship to what he does. The scene between his establishment and the fight itself build a specific kind of anticipation that is different from the anticipation before any of the other fight because the anticipation is not about whether right can win, it's about what winning mean in this specific case. These are two people who in a different world would respect each other. These are two people who understand the same thing about combat and about discipline, and they are being required to fight to potentially kill each other for the entertainment of a man who understands neither of those things. The choreography of the fight expresses these in physical terms. There are moments of pause, of genuine recognition between the fighters that break the rhythm of the match in ways that make the referees nervous and that you read as two people struggling against the instrumentalization of what they know, and the outcome, which I shall leave unspecified, arrive with the weight and that the film and through everything it built toward it. The close on Adkins' face after the fight end is one of his best single moments in the film, completely still, completely interior and devastating in its restraint. This is the scene I keep returning to as evidence that Adkins and his films are doing something more substantial than they are usually given credit for. The setup is simple, right, and Villanova in the dark of the barracks after a particularly brutal day, and Villanova talks and Wright listens. What Villanova say is not profound dialogue in the literary sense. It's ordinary speech about ordinary human things, about what he's thinking about what he's afraid of. But the quality of Adkins listening in this scene, the physical stillness, the absolute presence, the sense that what Villanova is saying is going in and mattering and changing something internal, is acting at a high level. This scene exists, I think, because Adkins understood that Wright needed a moment of genuine vulnerability, a moment where the armor of the action hero persona is set down entirely, and he created the space for that to happen. It's the scene that makes everything that follows emotionally coherent, and it's the scene I had used as evidence if someone tried to argue that this film has no emotional dimension. There is a scene in the second act where Ito executes a prisoner in front of the assembled camp population as a demonstration of authority, and this scene is the film's most difficult and most ethically necessary moment. I want to engage with it carefully because the question of when difficult content in genre films serve the story and when it's gratuitous is a real one, and I think Prisoner of War handles this particular scene on the right side of that line. The execution is not filmed for spectacle, it's filmed for weight. The camera is at middle distance rather than close, which means you see the fact without being forced into a voyeuristic relationship to the violence and the composition of the surrounding crowd. The expression, the posture, the collective reaction is where the scene's meaning lies. Right watching and being unable to act is the sense moral center, and Adkins plays that enforced passivity with the physical control, the tension of a person holding everything, and because any expression of it would be dangerous, that is profoundly uncomfortable to watch in exactly the right way. I have discussed this scene plausibility problems, and I don't want to relitigate them here. When I want to say about it in scene breakdown terms is what it does well, which is give Wright a moment of tactical agency that is not physical, is not about his martial arts capability, and reveals a dimension of his character that the fight sequence cannot reveal, which is his capacity for patient, intelligent planning under pressure. The tension of the scene, the risk of discovery is genuine and well staged, and Adkins plays the urgency of it without letting it tip into melodrama. It's a functional scene that serves the story despite its plausibility issues, and sometimes functional is what a scene needs to be. I shall say one more thing about the final dojo scene that I have not said elsewhere, and it's this: the choice to return to this space to end the film where it began rather than ending on the immediate aftermath of the escape is a decision that most clearly shows you this is a film with a considered overall form rather than just a sequence of incidents. The return creates a narrative circle that means something, that tells you the film understood from the beginning what it was about and shape everything accordingly to what absolutely blew me away about Prisoner of War, and I want to be specific rather than just enthusiastic here, is Scott Adkins' dramatic performance in the spaces between fights. I have admired his physical work for years, and I think he is genuinely one of the great screen martial artists in film history, but this is the first film where I came away believing that his dramatic range is not the limitation on his career that his filmography sometimes suggests. The scene where Wright is just thinking, just carrying the weight of his situation, are performed with the depth and authenticity that I did not accept and I that have been thinking about since I finished the film. The Koji fight sequence, taken as a whole, from setup through execution through aftermath, is one of the best pieces of martial arts cinema I have seen in recent years, and I would defend that claim against comparison to anything in the last 5 years of the genre. The director's visual approach to the fights is a genuine artistic statement about how action cinema should look, and it pay off in sequence that reward multiple viewings. Shinkoda's antagonist is the kind of villain that make his protagonist more interesting by being a worthy and specific foil rather than a generic obstacle, and the film's antagonist writing is, in that central relationship, significantly better than its protagonist's sport writing. The historical setting is used with genuine seriousness that elevates every sequence set within it, because the weight of what actually happened in these camps is present in the film even when it is not explicitly discussed. Here, where it's lost me, and I shall be as specific about the frustrations as I was about the achievements. There's a role in the film is the clearest missed opportunity I can identify in recent action cinema, and I find it frustrating in proportion to how interesting a fuller version of her character would have been. Garcia is compelling in every moment the camera gives her, and the character's position as a Filipino woman in a camp serving the occupiers of her country contains more emotional and historical richness than any other character in the film. The fact that the film uses her as a support mechanism for Wright rather than as a perspective the story genuinely inhabits is a failure of creative imagination that makes the film smaller than it should be. The escape plot mechanics, specific the radio scene, and the coincidence the escape timing required are the place where the screenplays reach most visibly exceed its craft, and the effect is a slight deflation of the film's tonal integrity. The pacing in the second half of the film between the Koji fight and the third act's escalation has passages that are slightly sluggish, where the screenplay is setting up logistics that could be established more efficiently, and those passages allow the film's energy to sag in way that tighter editorial choices could have addressed. Some of the dialogue in the sporting character scene is functional I rather than revealing, meaning it moves the plot without adding to the texture of who these people are, and that's the kind of writing that a second draft might have improved significantly. These are the things I can't stop thinking about, the images and the exchanges that have stayed with me since I finished the film and that tell me, regardless of its problems, that this is a film that did something real. The opening do the opening dojo walk in before a world of dialogue where the whole film's weight is present in a single entrance. The pause inside the koji fight, just a moment where both men stop and look at each other, and you see the recognition of what this is and what it cost them. The after fight silence when Wright walk away, Adkins back to the camera and the composition that has Ito's satisfied expression in the background behind him. The barracks scene and the quality of Adkins listening, the execution scene, and what enforced passivity cost a man who has made action his identity, the final dojo and the conversation that make the whole journey cohere. Six sequence, six images and exchange, they are worth the 2 hours spent getting to them, and this is legitimate claim by any film in any genre. In 10 years, we shall remember Prisoner of War as a film that marked Scott Adkins' transition from action star to something more interesting and less easily categorized, and that's a meaningful legacy, even if the film itself does not achieve everything it reaches for. The history of action cinema is full of transition film movies where you can see a performer or director pushing against the limits of what they have been asked to do and finding either a new vocabulary of evidence that they need one. And this is that kind of film. Adkins showing that he can sustain a dramatically complex performance across a feature-length film while simultaneously delivering his best physical work. That combination of capabilities changes what producer and director should be willing to offer him and expect from him going forward. The film plays in the action cinema landscape of the mid 2020 is as evidence that the direct-to-video (VOD) tier of the market has genuine creative ambition operating within it, and that film in distribution category deserve critical engagement rather than reflexive dismissal. The best film in the tier and Prisoner of War is near the top of that group, are doing things with genre conventions and historical material that their more commercially visible counterpart often don't bother with, and that's worth saying clearly and repeatedly until the critical conservation catches up. There is no announced sequel or franchise continuation from the specific films of my knowledge, and I think the story as told is more or less complete in a way that make sequelization less necessary than it is for some action film properties. Rai's journey has a destination in the final dojo scene, and continuing from the would require a different story rather than more of the same one. What I would like to see is Adkins and Mandalore apply the creative ambition of Prisoner of War to another project that benefit from the lesson learned here, specifically about how to develop sporting character and how to maintain tonal consistency across a full feature. The working relationship has clearly produced something worth continuing, and the collaboration that made this film as good as it deserves to be given another opportunity. More broadly, I hope this film contributes to a conversation about what Scott Adkins, the creative force, as opposed to Scott Adkins, the hard action star, want to make and is capable of making because the answer to that question suggested by Prisoner of War is more interesting than the answer suggested by much of his earlier work. Let me give you the full breakdown with the reasoning behind each number. Story 7 out of 10. The structural ambition is real, the genre hybridization is largely successful, and the thematic content is genuinely present and genuinely interesting. But the second half execution has real problems, specifically the escape mechanics and the sporting character underdevelopment that prevent it from being the great film it sometimes threatens to become. Character 6.5 out of 10. Wright and Ito are excellent, fully realized, and the films earn their performances completely. The sporting ensemble is significantly underdeveloped in a way that goes the emotional climax exactly the impact it needs, and that gap between the lead character quality and the supporting character quality is too large to ignore. Acting 8 out of 10. Adkins and Shinkoda are doing career caliber work. The supporting cast is adequate to good throughout. The performances overall are the most consistent source of quality in the film. Direction 7 out of 10. Exceptional in the action sequence, competent in the dramatic sequence, and the tonal balance between the film's different genres the registers is mostly well maintained. Cinematography 7.5 out of 10. Deliberate, thoughtful, with a specific visual approach that serves the story consistently, and the fight sequence photography that is among the best in the genre. Music and sound design 7 out of 10. Disciplined, restrained, make the right call about when to use score and when to let the physical reality of the scene do the work. Writing 6 out of 10. Ambition conception, genuine thematic content, strong lead character work but uneven dialogue, underdeveloped supporting character, and convenient plot mechanics that strain the film's tonal integrity. Entertainment value 8 out of 10. The film is almost never boring and regularly genuinely thrilling, and that sustained entertainment quality is the clearest evidence that the filmmaker understands what an audience needs from this kind of cinema. Overall 7 out of 10, letter grade B, star out of 5, 3.5. Genuine quality that fall short of greatness but exceed expectation and deserve recognition. And here's the thing about Adkins that I think is actually quite interesting and that Prisoner of War directly engage with, which is the question of whether he can anchor a film on more than just physical performance, because if you are honest about his filmography, the films that really work are the ones where the physical performance are matched by stories and characters that give those performances meaning. Boyka work as a character not just because Adkins is extraordinary to watch fight, but because there are genuine moral and spiritual arc to the character that make the physical journey meaningful. And Prisoner of War is, in my reading, the most direct attempt Adkins has made to answer the question of whether he can drive a film dramatically as well as physically, and the answer, as I shall keep returning to, is a complicated but mostly affirmative yes. The casting of Peter Shinkoda as the film's primary antagonist, Lieutenant Colonel Ito, is the single best known Adkins decision of the film makes. I want to make absolutely sure this does not get lost. Shinkoda has appeared in various film and television projects, including Daredevil on Netflix, but this is probably the most substantial villainous role he's been given, and what he does with it is genuinely impressive. He brings this very specific quality to Ito, which is the quality of contained institutional manners, the manners of a man who uses system and structure to do violence rather than doing it in a raw emotional eruption. And that kind of villain is often harder to make work on screen than the bombastic theatrical kind, because it requires the actor to do most of their work through restraint rather than expression. Shinkoda does it impeccably. Donald Caron plays Captain Collins, and this casting choice is the one I want to engage with most carefully because it provokes the most genuinely interesting discussion about what casting is for in an action film of this kind. Caron is primarily known as legendary MMA fighter. He competed for air in the UFC at various weight classes and was known for finishing fights with dramatic knockout and submission, and his acting experience is limited, so going in, if you are expecting a sporting performance that adds dramatic complexity or scene stealing energy to the film, you are going to be somewhat let down. That's just honest. Caron worked within a pretty narrow range as a performer, but I want to make an argument for why the casting functions anyway, and it's this. Collins as a character is written as a capable but not exceptional soldier, a man who is reliable but who defers to better people when the situation goes beyond his capacity, and Caron's natural screen presence, his unpretentious non sense physicality, his sense of being a man who has genuinely been hit many times and accepted it, all of that matches what Collins is on the page in a way that a more conventionally trained actor might not have provided through artifice. He looked like a man who has been in real combat because he has been in real combat, and that the physical truth come through on screen. He is not a great actor. At the end of the day, Prisoner of War is a film I want to exist and a film I am glad exists, and those are two different things that happen to align here. I want it to exist because it represents an attempt to give martial art action cinema genuine thematic weight and genuine dramatic ambition, and more attempt in that direction is good for the genre and good for the audience who love the genre. I am glad it exists because in its best moment it actually achieved those ambitions, and those moments are real and memorable and worth the time spent getting to them. You should watch it if you are a Scott Adkins fan. Absolutely, this is probably the most complete version of what he can do that we have seen in a film set primarily in the martial art action tradition. You should watch it if you have interested in what smart people can do with genre convention and this historical martial material on a limited budget. You should watch it if the idea of a martial art film with genuine ethical stakes and genuine dramatic consequences appeal to you. You should temper your expectation if you are coming primarily for a war drama with the scope and character depth of the genre classic, because this is not that film and asking it to be is unfair. The film's rewatchability is real, and I have watched it 3 times at this point with real engagement each time, which is the most direct evidence I can offer that it achieved what is not what it's setting out to achieve. The imperfections are real too, and I have tried to be honest about them throughout this analysis because fair witness criticism is more useful than either gushing or dismissal. What this film is at its truest is a passionate, imperfect, genuinely ambitious piece of genre cinema from a performer who is trying to grow and from a creative team that believe in what they are making. That combination of qualities is not common, and when you find it, it's worth 2 hours of serious attention. Let me actually step back for a second because I said I want to go properly deep on Adkins' career, and I want to make good on that promise because I think it genuinely illuminates what this film and what it's trying to do. The thing about Scott Adkins that frustrates people who discover him is that it seems on the surface like the industry has done him dirty, and I say it seems that way because the full reality is more complicated. He has been in over 70 films. He has worked consistently for over 2 decades. He has a global fan base that is remarkably loyal and that show up for everything he does. By any reasonable metric, that's a successful career. The frustration is that it's a successful career at a ceiling that seems artificially low given the talent involved, and I think the reason for that ceiling is actually interesting if you spend time thinking about it rather than just attributing it to Hollywood being dumb, which is the easy answer. The real answer has to do with the specific nature of what Adkins does and how it fits, or rather how it does not quite to fit into the mainstream Hollywood action star framework. The mainstream Hollywood action star of the last 20 years is built on the combination of brand recognition, general audience appeal, and a physical presence that suggests capability without requiring demonstration. Dwayne Johnson, Tom Cruise in his action mode, the Marvel Ensemble. What these stars sell is primarily personality and brand, with the action as a sporting element. Adkins is the opposite. His primary thing is genuinely extraordinary physical capability, the ability to do things with his body that very few humans can do, and the personality and the dramatic ability. While real have been scandally in how his career has been built and positioned, Hollywood does not have a very good temple for what you can with an action performer whose primary gift is physical mastery rather than star persona. Outside of the narrow lane of the direct to video martial art film, and so that the lane he is occupied even when individual projects suggest he was capable of more. What's interesting about Prisoner War in this context is that its attempt coming from Adkins himself to make a film that demonstrates both things simultaneously and to make it on his own terms rather than in the context of someone else's franchise or someone else's star vehicle. That's actually a bold creative, and regardless of the distribution context and understanding it as such change the stakes of how you evaluate the film. This is not Adkins doing what he's told. This is Adkins saying, "This is the film I want to make, this is the story I want to tell, and this is the performance I want to give." The fact that it has problem alongside its genuine quality is almost beside the point compared to the significance of the attempt. I want to go back to the second act for a moment because I don't think I fully captured something important about how the film's moral logic develops across the fight sequence, and something that requires you to hold the whole arc in your head rather than just evaluating individual sequence. Here, what the film is doing across the series of fights in the second act and subtle enough that easy to miss on a first viewing. Each fight Wright engaged in a present a slightly different moral position than that the one before. The first fight is pure self-preservation. He is forced in and he survives, and the moral calculation is as simple as simple as it get survive. The second fight introduced the element of choice. He is pressured rather than physically forced, and the choice is more complicated. Whether the information advantage he is developing within the system justifies continued participation. The third fight, and I am speaking in approximate terms here rather than absolute sequential terms, introduce the element of protecting others. He fights in part to divert attention from something the other prisoners are doing, and now the moral calculation has expanded to include people beyond himself. And the Koji fight, the culmination of this sequence, is where all of those previously separate moral calculations collide simultaneously, because Koji is someone Bright respects, someone whose participation in the system reflect a different but equally coherent moral response to an impossible situation, and fighting him required Wright to actively choose his own moral framework over the respect he has for another person different but legitimate choices. That's a remarkably sophisticated moral arc for an action film to be running, and I want to give it its due credit. The reason it works as drama rather than just a moral philosophy is that Adkins embeds all of that complexity in the physical performance of the fights themselves. You can read the escalating moral cost in how he enters each fight, how he occupies the space before the first contact, how he carries himself in the immediate aftermath. That's not something most action performers think about or directors ask for, and the fact that it presents here is the evidence that someone, either Adkins or Mandelier or both, was thinking about the fights as moral event rather than just physical showcase. There's theme running through Prisoner of War that I have not spent enough time on, and it connects to something that I think is the film's deepest and most personal concern. The theme is about what war does to identity, specifically the identity of a person whose sense of self is built around a skill or a discipline or code, because Wright is not just a soldier captured in a war, he is a person who has built his entire sense of himself around a particular understanding of what combat means and what it's for, an understanding shaped by martial art philosophy, and he is now in an environment that is systematically using that very thing, combat, to destroy him. The camp is not just trying to break him physically, it's trying to use the thing he is most confident in, his fighting ability, as the mechanism of his degradation, and that specifically targeted kind of attack on identity that most action film protagonists don't face. Most action film protagonists face opponents who want to defeat them, to overcome them, to destroy them. Wright face an opponent who want to use him, to instrumentalize him, to make his strength the vehicle of his own diminishment. And I think that's actually the most psychologically resonant element of the film's premise, though the screenplay does not always find the language to make that resonance explicit. It's there in the structure of the fights and in Adkins' performance within them, but it's there more as an application than as fully stated idea. I want to spend more time on the Baton context because I think the specificity of the historical moment the film is set in contributes things to the story that a fictional or less specific historical setting would not, and those contributions are worth naming carefully. The Battle of Baton, which began in January 1942 and ended with the fall of Baton in April 1942, was one of the most significant defeats in American military history, involving the surrender of approximately 75,000 Allied troops, both American and Filipino, to Japanese forces. The subsequent death march, during which somewhere between 5,000 and 18,000 Filipino and 500 to 650 American prisoners died from disease, starvation, and direct violence, was designated a war crime and was used as one of the bases for the post-war trial and the execution of General Mahaso Homia, who commanded the Japanese forces in Philippines. I realize I want to say more about Shinkoda because I keep circling back to his performance in my head, and I don't think I have fully captured what make it work in the analysis I have given you. There is a category of screen villain performance that I think is genuinely undervalued and under-theorized by most film criticism, which is the villain who is frightening not because of what they do but because of how completely they believe in what they do. the theatrical villain, the one who enjoys their own villainy, the one who relies quality as an aesthetic choice, is actually much easier to watch and much easier for an actor to play the buristic villain, the ideological villain, the man who has integrated systematic violence so thoroughly into his worldview that he experiences no dissonance between who has believed himself to be and things he orders. Prison of War is a film that is reaching. You can feel it in every department in Adkins' dramatic choices that go beyond what the action star persona would require, in Mandalore visual decision that consistently point toward something more serious than genre convention demand, in the screenplay thematic content that could have been removed without making the film commercially less viable was kept because someone cared about it. That caring is visible and it matters to me, and I hope this is an analysis has communicated why it matters and why a film that carries in specific and identifiable ways about something more than delivering entertainment deserve to be engaged with carefully rather than categorized and set aside. And that is everything I have for you on Prison of War 2025. If you made it all the way here from the opening dojo to the final verdicts, then genuinely thank you, because what I am trying to do with this channel is give film the kind of attention they deserve rather than the kind of attention the algorithm reward, and that only makes sense to invest when people actually show up for the full conversation. Comments are open and I read them all, especially the disagreement and especially anything that challenges the reading I have given here. If you think I was too generous, make the argument. Subscribe if this is your kind of content, long form analysis that take genre cinema seriously and goes deep on every dimension rather than